Hey friends, have you ever wanted to build your own AI-powered chat application without breaking the bank? Well, today we're going to create something awesome, a prompt optimization tool using DeepSeek AI. And the best part, it'll run on your own server that you set up. We'll build this from scratch using Vue.js, Node, Ubuntu, and a Hostinger VPS server. By the end of this video, you'll have a fully functional, secure web application that can help improve your AI prompts. Whether you're a developer looking to expand your skills or someone ready to build their own AI application, this project is perfect for you. It's a long one, but I promise it's worth it. So let's dive in and build something amazing together. I'm Jeremy Morgan, and you're going to learn something about AI today. Let's answer the big question up front. Why are we hosting this ourselves? We have ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and a million other services just an API call away. Why are we doing this? The first reason is avoiding API usage fees. So many AI APIs charge per request or per token, and it can get expensive over time. And it's unpredictable. You could pay hundreds of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars if something big happens. You may not be able to afford a big surge. Now, running models locally eliminates network latency associated with API calls. While this isn't always a problem, it can be. And no rate limits. You can have your customers use their API as much as it can handle. Many APIs have usage caps or throttling limits that can slow down operations. Now, what about privacy and security? Well, sensitive data stays on your server, reducing exposure to third parties. So you have a bunch of users that are using your app. Do you really know where their prompts are going, who's storing them, who's using them, etc.? When you build something like what we're going to build today, you know exactly where their data is, how it's stored, and you can get rid of it. And this is great for industries with strict data regulations. So if you're trying to comply with GDPR, HIPAA, etc., it's great. Now, you can fine-tune or customize open source models to better fit your needs. And you can select the hardware and software stack that optimizes performance. Now, let's talk about another big thing. You can upgrade hardware or optimize the model instead of paying for expensive API tiers. You can run various AI models for different tasks without being restricted by an API's limitation. And API providers can change pricing, they can deprecate services, or limit functionality without any notice, and it's super annoying. And you can control updates, ensuring continuity without unexpected disruptions. Now let's look at caching and performance. You can implement caching layers or pre-processed embeddings to speed up your processes. And unlike APIs that process every request from scratch, a VPS can store and reuse the previous results, which we're going to do in this video. You can run models like DeepSeek R1, Ollama, Mistral, Stable Diffusion, whatever, and that promotes decentralized AI. Now, some APIs filter or modify responses based on company policies, and you can avoid all that by using your own open source model. These are the big reasons for running AI locally and the whole reason that we've created this video. And I'll end with this great quote. Make sure you own your own AI. AI in the cloud is not aligned with you, it's aligned with the company that owns it. So let's jump in, shall we? All right, so this is a sponsored video. Hostinger provided me with a VPS server to use for this application. Now you can build the exact same virtual private server that we're building in this tutorial today. Go to hostinger.com/Jeremy. And from here, select Choose Your Plan. Now for the VPS hosting plans, I'm using a KV8 for this today. However, you could use a KVM4 and maybe even a KVM2. But this one is the biggest and best service they have available. Now, if you select this and where it says have a coupon code, put in the coupon code of Jeremy, and you can see a significant savings here. Now, I'd like to point out, if you look at this pricing, it's $17.99 a month. That's nearly impossible to get that low of a rate in API calls. Maybe if you're only sending just a few API calls a day, you might be able to get that under with one of the larger services like ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever. However, with $17.99 a month here, you get your own server that you can send as many AI calls as it will handle. So this is a heck of a savings. Imagine building your own AI application for $17.99 a month. This is awesome. And this is a great way to own your own AI, your own self-contained system, which is what we're going to be building today. So if you want to use the same server that I'm using today, go to hostinger.com/Jeremy. So here I've got a couple of VPSs set up. This is the one that our application is going to be built on here. You can see here your CPU usage, memory, disk usage, etc. And it's pretty awesome. There's an AI assistant to help you out if you have questions. There's tons of different settings that you can configure on your control panel. So we also have a browser terminal. So I can just click this and it will SSH right into my server, ready to go. And here we go. I'm SSH'd into the server. There's a lot of cool stuff like backups and monitoring, snapshots, etc. This is, without a doubt, a professional solution, right? And what I mean by that is this isn't just some cheesy little virtual server, stack up. This is actual managed stuff. It's very secure, and it gives you power to do whatever you want to do. We're going to log in as root and install things and do whatever. So if your web hosting needs are something like just, deploying websites or whatever, they've got solutions for that. If you're doing something custom, like what we're doing in this video today, then a virtual server is the way to go. This is a bona fide Ubuntu server out in the cloud. It's fast. And without further ado, let's get started building this application. So now I'm going to set up the VPS here on Hostinger. You can see here we have several options for choosing a server in your area. I'll select United States, Phoenix. Next, we have a set of OS templates available. All the popular Linux distributions you could think of are here. There are also several one-click applications you can set up here, so you can just click a button and it'll install applications. Everything from Laravel to Docker, Moodle, and more. There's even a one-click for Ollama, but we're going to install ours manually. And I'm going to choose Ubuntu for this. And as you can see, we have several versions available. And check this out. If I choose to, it will install the Monarchs malware scanner on my server. I want to keep this safe, so I'll choose that. Here I need to enter a root password for my new server. I can add SSH keys or change the host name if I want as well. And I'll click Next and then Finish Setup. And it's that easy. After a few minutes, it starts up and I can SSH in and get started. All right, so I'm logged in here to my server on Hostinger, and I'm logged in as root. And this is provided to me by the console, etc. But I want to create another user to do all these operations. I don't want to run this stuff as root the whole time that I'm doing it. So let's go ahead and add a new user. So I'm going to say add user, Jeremy, password. A nice secure password here. Put in my full name. All right. And one of the things I want to do is I want to be able to sudo in and do things, right? So I want to be able to act as root when I need to through sudo. So I'll do that here and say usermod -ag sudo Jeremy. So now I should be able to log in as Jeremy and then run sudo commands as root. Now I'm going to SSH back in as Jeremy. So now I'm going to SSH back in as Jeremy. Awesome. And one of the things I want to do also is change the host name. As we can see right now, my host name is srv714735. So I'm going to say sudo hostname ctl set hostname, and I'm going to set this to promptbuilder.jeremymorgan.com. Awesome. Now I log back in and we can see that I'm Jeremy at Prompt Builder. Perfect. Now I want to connect remotely with Visual Studio Code. And here we go into Visual Studio Code and we say connect to host. I'm going to say Jeremy at promptbuilder.jeremymorgan.com. It says enter the password. We'll do that. And now it's downloading the VS Code server. I'm going to jump back into my terminal real quick. Let's create a project for this. So we're in the home directory in home Jeremy. You can say make-dir apps. Awesome. And this is going to be my prompt builder directory where I'm going to build everything. So we can select here, home Jeremy apps, prompt builder. And yes, I trust the authors. And now we're ready to go. Awesome. And just as another reminder, if you'd like to set up the same thing, go to hostinger.com/Jeremy to get it set up. All right, so what are we going to do here? Well, in this tutorial, we're going to create a chat application using Vue.js for the front end, Node.js and Express for the back end, and Ollama for AI processing. And we'll build a full chat interface where messages are ephemeral, which means they disappear when the browser closes. And most importantly, once we get it running as a chat server, we're going to enhance it with a prompt optimization feature so that people can put in a prompt and it's going to send it to the AI model, to DeepSeek R1, and DeepSeek R1 is going to optimize that prompt and send an optimized one back that people can use for the future. And to top it all off, we're going to deploy this on the Hostinger VPS, and we're going to point a domain name to it and make a fully running application. So this is basically an AI assistant powered by DeepSeek R1, and it's something that you can build. If you follow this exact plan, you can build your own application on this Hostinger VPS, which these things, I've been working with them and trying them out. These things are fast. So this is a good way to get AI into your organization for a pretty reasonable price. So without further ado, let's jump in. Now, one of the first things we want to do is, so I've got my project open. Let's go ahead and open up a new terminal. And in this terminal, and we're going to do sudo apt-get update and sudo apt-get upgrade with a -y. So we just hit enter and it just rolls off and does everything that we need it to do. We want this to be the most updated version that we can get. All right, awesome. And we're going to go ahead and update this and reboot it. And we'll give it a minute and reconnect. All right, now we've reconnected. And the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to create a chat backend. Now, this is one thing that I like to do to kind of set up some middleware here between Ollama and our Vue application. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use Express and Axios to kind of create a server.js that's going to be an intermediate between the two. And I found that this works really well. So I'm going to call this chat backend. So I'll do a make-dir chat-backend and cd chat backend. And in here, we'll do an npm init-y. Oh, an npm is not found. Awesome. So I will install that really quick. Sudo apt install npm. All right, so we've got that installed. And now we can do the npm init-y. Let's initialize our npm application. Now, one of the things we're going to use here is Express, Cores, and Axios. So I will install each of those. There we go. And so this application is actually only going to be one file name. It's going to be server.js. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want this to be kind of a bare minimum type application. Now, if you're building a full-fledged enterprise level application, it's not going to be like this exactly, but I just want to kind of do the bare minimum that we can get to get something nice up and running that we can strengthen later or things like that. So I'll do a touch server.js, open that up over here, and let's dig in. Now, we won't spend a ton of time explaining all of the code, but I will kind of show you how this thing's put together. So we have our Express instance here, our cores and Axios, and then of course, we're creating an application. Now, I've created my application here using Express, and we're going to use cores and then express.json. Now, CORS is really important because you can create these APIs and you can hit them with Postman, you can hit them with curl, whatever. But once you start going into the browser world, there can be a bunch of complications. So I've found that using this server.js method that I'm showing here is a great way to provide that intermediary, and you can get rid of a lot of these problems with CORS and things like that. And so that's what we're going to use. Now, the next thing we need to do is create some temporary in-memory store for messages. Now, I'll put that in here and then I'll explain why we're doing this. Because we have a back and forth that we can do with these models, right? As we install Ollama, I'll show you we can send it a prompt, get an answer, and that's it. You can send it a second prompt and it will give you another answer with no context whatsoever. We want to have a little bit of context here, so we want to be able to create a true conversation. In order to create a conversation, we need to store our messages so that we can tell the LLM, hey, these are the previous messages, and kind of use that as context to make it like a real conversation, right? Because you wouldn't walk up to someone and say, hey, how are you doing today? And they say, oh, I'm doing fine. And then you say, how are the kids? And then have them say, how are the kids? What are you talking about? Who are you? You know, etc. You want to make it like a real conversation. So in order to do that, we need to keep track of the previous messages and keep a little history there. Now, the next method that I'm going to dump in here is saving messages. And here we're going to create a route to API chat save. And this is going to have a session ID, a message, and is user in the body. And in this message, you can take a look at it. New message is an ID, which is just date.now, right? We're just going to do that to do the ID because the chances of two messages coming in at exactly the same time are pretty slim. Now, if we have 1 million users in here, yeah, that's probably going to happen. But for our purposes, this will work great for creating a unique ID. So we'll have an ID of date.now. We'll have a session ID, a message, is user, and timestamp. And as you can see here, we do messages.push. We push that into this messages array, and then we kick it back. And so here, I'm going to put in some comments and just say save messages. Now, one of the things we need to do, of course, we have the messages saved. We need to load them up for a session. And in order to do that, we need to grab all of these messages that we have with the same session ID. So this will be our next one. And this one is API chat load. So if we load this up, we pass in a session ID, it will send back all of the messages that are within that message conversation. Now, this one is going to be a pretty big method. And this one is going to send our messages to the AI and get a response. And I'm copying and pasting so you don't have to watch me type through things because I'm not great at typing while I'm recording. If you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you already know that. I'm not great at typing when the camera is on. But here we can see we have API chat send. Okay, and we have a constant here, session ID plus a message, and we're going to pull that from the body. We're going to save the user message here, and that's going to be, again, ID date now, session ID, message is user true, timestamp here with a new date, and then we're going to push that into our array. Here we say prepare context, and this is going to be the last 4 messages that are sent in this session ID by this person. And so this might look a little complicated, but basically this is just saying, hey, the last 4 messages that were sent by this person in the session ID, we need to join those together and we'll use those as a part of our prompting process. Now this part is where we actually talk to Ollama. So we're going to be using Ollama for the backend, and I know there's a ton of different choices for backends out there. I really like Ollama for several reasons, and one of them being that it is super easy to work with. So working with Ollama, I'm not sure how they could have made it any easier to come in and work with these large language models. As soon as a model is available on Ollama, you can hit it with all these different API calls, exactly the same, etc. However, instead of Llama 2 for this, we're going to choose a different model. We're going to use DeepSeek R1 1.5 billion parameter. Now that's the very smallest model possible. When we go to install Ollama and we download the models, we're going to see if we can run something bigger, but let's start with the smallest model first. And as you can see here, we're sending this Axios post, and this is a pretty standard Ollama call where we say, here's the model, and then we'll send the prompt, and then we'll say stream equals false. We don't want this to be streaming because it's going to be semi-asynchronous where we just send a prompt and then get a response. Now here we have save AI message. So we're creating a constant for that. We're pushing it into that messages queue, and then we're going to respond and send the response back. If we have an error, we'll catch this and say AI failed to respond. And after this, we're just going to drop in our app.listen, port 3000, and we're going to say console.log backend running on localhost 3000. This is pretty much our server.js for now. We're going to come back and do a bunch of modifications to it, but for now, this should work. And that will be our chat backend. All right, so now we've completed the backend. Obviously, the next step is the front end. So the next thing I'm going to do here is we will install the Vue CLI, and we'll do it globally, just in case we want to do Vue apps on this in the future. All right, we'll clear that. And then we're going to create a Vue app named chat-frontend. Now in here, we want to choose Vue 3. All right, now our app is created. And then in here, we're going to want to install Axios and UUID. All right, perfect. Now we have a chat front-end app created and ready to go. All right. So in here, we're going to jump into our app.vue, and we're going to do a whole bunch of changes here. Now it's asking me if I want to install the recommended Vue extension. So yeah, let's install that. Now what we're going to have to do is put in a template. Here we have the default page that Vue gives you when you create a new Vue application. We'll remove that template and put in a template of our own. Now here you can see that we're doing a v-4 to loop through message in messages. And we have a key of message.id. We have a class, message is user, and it differentiates between user and AI. And that's going to be important for styling. And it just displays the message that's put out. Now here we have a button down here in the input area that's a new message, and it says type a message, and we put in our prompt. And then we click send message, and that's going to call a JavaScript function that will send a message. So for our script area, we have import hello world from hello world view, etc. We'll just delete that. We're going to put in our own script. And the first thing we'll do is we're going to import Axios from Axios. Not even sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And then we're going to import a UUID object, which we'll use later. Now, what are we going to export? Well, it turns out a whole bunch of stuff. So here we're going to export a default data, and we're going to return session ID, messages, new message. And then here we have a created function where we create it, and there's our UUID v4 being called. And that's when a new message is created. We're going to set a session ID for that, and we're going to load that message into an array. Here we have load messages. Now this is what happens when we call the API and say, give us all the messages. This is called here. And then async send message is when we send the message to our API here. So we have localhost 3000 API chat send that directly interacts with Ollama to send a message to Ollama. Now for the styles, we don't have much here, right? But we can drop in some styles, and I won't make you watch me type this. But here's the styles we're looking at. We have a chat container, we have a messages div, we have a user and AI, that way it's a little bit different for each one. We have an input area styling here, and then we have our button style. Now, as far as it goes here, we can run this. We can say npm run serve. This should load up an application for us. Now it's running at localhost 8080. And if we load that up here, promptbuilder.jeremymorgan.com 8080, it says invalid host header, which is fine. We can. Okay, so I've added a setting here for a server. It says allowed hosts equals all and host equals 0.0.0.0. So we can go in and access this publicly. Let's try it now. Now we can see we have a chat front end. Now we know this isn't going to work because we don't have Ollama installed yet, but let's test it out. Failed the send message. Okay, perfect. But at least we've got this thing up and running and ready to go. Now let's install Ollama. Okay, so I'm connected to the server through SSH, and we're going to install Ollama. And we'll do this from the command that's available on the Ollama website. And we'll install it. You can see here it's downloading the Linux AMD 64 bundle. Okay, now it's done installing. And you can see here it says the Ollama API is now available. Install complete. Notice the warning, it says no NVIDIA AMD GPU detected. So Ollama will run in CPU only mode, which is expected, and it's fine. Let's pull down a couple of models that we'll use. Now the first model that we're going to use is the 1.5 billion parameter model. That's our smallest one. We're going to see how it runs, and then we'll see how high we can go before it gets too slow to be usable. Now to start, we'll pull down that model. Okay, and it successfully pulled it down. Now let's run this and let's see what kind of token output we get. We'll do Ollama run, DeepSeek R1, and we'll do verbose. Okay, and I'll say, tell me a funny joke about Python. And we can just see visually here that it's spitting out a pretty good rate. I mean, this is a fast server, and it is spitting these out pretty quick. And look at that, 42 tokens a second, which is a great speed. This is definitely usable for a chat application online. And keep in mind that this is a VPS server, so it's your own server running your own stuff at 42 tokens a second. That's awesome. Let's try to step it up a little bit, and we'll go with the next higher model. And in this one, we're going to pull the 7 billion parameter model. Okay, and it's downloaded. So we're going to do the same thing with the 7 billion parameter model. We're going to say -- verbose. All right, that's loaded up. We'll say, tell me a funny joke about Python. And as we can see here, this is still running pretty fast. Now, once again, you can set up a server like this for yourself at hostinger.com/Jeremy. Use that code to get a discount, and you can run a VPS just like this that will run an API application pretty fast. Now, if we look at our eval rate here, we're at 13.65 tokens a second. That is a little bit slower, but it's still totally usable. So when you're building your own application, go between the 1.5 billion parameter and the 7 billion parameter and see if the 1.5 billion parameter model is able to give you what you need for results. If so, it's going to be really fast. If it's not giving the results you like, then you might want to try upgrading to the 7 billion parameter model, which, as you can see here, runs a little bit slower, but runs pretty well. But now that we have these installed, our application should connect to it and work. So let's try it out in our web application now. We'll say, tell me a funny joke about Python. And it still says failed to send message. Okay, so we're going to need to open up our Ollama service to the outside network as well. If we send a curl request to Ollama, we can see here Ollama is running. Perfect, but it's not exposing itself to the outside network. So let's change that. So I'm going to install Vim, because that is my preferred editor here. And I'm going to say sudo vim etc systemd system ollama.service. And in our ollama service.file, we can go in here and we'll say environment equals path, etc. And we'll do another environment variable here. It says Ollama host equals 0.0.0. Sudo systemctl daemon reload. And then we'll restart the Ollama service. Okay, now we've got this loaded up again. And we'll see if we can access Ollama from the outside. We'll just put this as a test. Still failed to send message. Now remember, we also need to change this down here. We're going to put 0.0.0.0 so that this server will listen on the outside network as well. Okay, now we've got those services up again. So we'll say, tell me a funny joke about Python. And there we go. We've got a chat response. Here's a lighthearted joke for you. Why don't programmers trust their keyboards? We can try several different ones here. I'm going on a hike in the Rocky Mountains. What should I bring? And there we go. Now, we have a chat interface going. We have it running. We've verified that Ollama works, our backend server works, and our front-end server works. But we're going to want to do some more things to this and make it a little bit more of a robust application, right? So we can just send this out as it is, but we want to do some fine-tuning for that. So let's jump into that. Okay, so this is going to be a prompt builder, right? So if we do something like, help me optimize this prompt, ask clarifying questions. Here's the prompt. And I could put something like, I am going on a camping trip. What should I bring? Send it. Now we get a prompt here, and we can see it's doing some thinking. It's kind of going, streaming down. It's going to ask, identify specific goals. Say, my goals are to climb Mount Everest. I'll hit enter. Now we can see here that we are getting context because this my goals are to climb Mount Everest is not being sent as a new prompt, right? It's saying, let me walk through how I approach it. It's inquiring about optimizing a prompt. That's great. Well, right now we have the last 4 messages as context. But I've kind of decided, after playing around with this thing that I actually want more than that, right? So we're going to go back and change it to all of the messages that are in the session. Now, if we go here, if we look at the prepare context, it says last 4 messages, right? And we have the session messages, and it does a slice. It takes 4 of them, and we use that as a part of the prompt. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. And we're going to add the following. Now here we're going to say get all messages for this session in chronological order. So we're going to take this and we're going to have all of the messages in our queue. We're going to filter them by the session ID, and we're going to sort them by the timestamps. So basically, we will have all of the messages in the session in chronological order, and then each time we send a prompt, it'll be added to that stack, and then all of that info will be sent into the large language model. Now, the downside from this is after a while, it's going to outgrow the context size. And you'll know that because it'll come back with an error. But so far in the testing that I've done with this, it's been pretty good as far as optimizing a prompt. Now down here, we have user message, AI message. And we're just going to change that. And this just makes sure that we have a concatenated set of messages, and these are all the previous messages that we've sent before within this session, which means you'll have to create a new session if you're going to do a new prompt, which is fine. Now, this is in server.js. Let's go into app.view. And in here, we're going to change our messages a little bit too, because we're going to style this differently coming up. And then we want to make sure that we're keeping track of all of those messages, not just the previous 4. And here we're going to call this the messages container. And we're going to put a different label on user messages and assistant messages. And basically what that's going to do is going to enable some styling stuff that we're going to do here in a minute. And we'll save that. And we can see the styling is a little bit different now. And so we need to add in some CSS down here, all the way to the bottom. And we're going to add that message label and our messages so that we can see it. So I want to do some UI stuff so that this looks better and it feels better and it's easier to use. So we've got a few annoying things here. Like, say if I go in here and I say, tell me a funny joke about Python. And I press send. What's happening? We don't know. Now, I know that if I, sit here long enough, it's going to come back. But our user doesn't know that. Our user might think, hey, nothing's happening. Maybe I should just hit send a bunch more times, which is going to send that prompt over and over and over, right? We need some kind of way to let you know that it's thinking and it's doing something. And so the easiest way is just to put something in there that says thinking. See, it comes back, just as I've been talking, this thing happens. So let's put that in. And we'll go up here to our input V model where it says new message, and then send. We're going to remove this and we're going to put in a more dynamic input. Now here, as soon as we hit send message, right, it's going to say type a message, and as soon as we hit send message, it's going to set is loading to disabled, right? So we're going to disable, part of what we're going to do is we're going to disable the input and the button, and we're going to say is loading, and we're going to do that as long as is loading is true. And we'll say thinking, right? So we're going to create this is loading variable. Anytime it's set to true, it's going to say thinking. Both the button and the input are going to be disabled. As soon as is loading is set back to false, which is when we get the return from the LLM, then it's going to enable it again. And this kind of lets us know that something is happening. So let's go down here where we're doing our export, and it says new message. In here, we're going to put in that is loading. And we want it to be false, right? Because when we start out, it's not going to be loading. So we want to default this to false. Now down here, where we have our async send message, we're going to put this is loading equals true. So whenever you hit that button and the send message is called, then we're going to set is loading into true. Now, when we do that, it disables things. It says is loading. Things come back. Well, how do we know when to turn that off? Well, what we'll do is we'll just put in a finally down here. We'll say finally, this is loading equals false. And now we just need to add in a couple styles for that disabled part. So we want to disable it, and we want it to look disabled. So when it's disabled, we'll change the opacity. We'll make sure the cursor is not allowed on both of them. And then this will give us that loading screen. This is a test. Click send. Now you can see it says thinking, and we can't type anything in here. We can't press anything. We can't do anything until it comes back. And there we go. And of course, because it still has context, it says, I need to create a funny Python joke, and it's still trying to do all of that. Now let's add some styling to this think element. Now, this is where DeepSeek R1 is a little bit different from models that you've used in the past, is we have this think, and it starts by opening a think tag, and it shows all of the thinking process that the model went through to come up with the result, which comes after the think, right? So let's style that so that it looks a little bit different. And that way we can kind of differentiate between the two. And this is just kind of a little touch that should help with users who are using our application. Now, it's a block level element. So we're putting in here, think, display block. We're doing a background color of black with white text. We're putting some padding around it, etc. And we're putting a margin on it. That way you can just see the difference between the think portion and the rest of the answer. Now, in order for those styles to take effect, we're going to need to render this out in HTML. So let's go up here to message.message, and instead of just outputting plain text, we're now going to use v.html. Now, This is going to change in just a minute, but we just want to make sure that this works. And as you can see, we do have a different style here. Okay, and here it is with the new style. So we can see that the thinking portion here is highlighted in a way. It's separated from the actual output of the prompt. So if you're really just looking for the results from the prompt, you can find them here. But if you want to know how it came to those results, the thinking portion, it's right here. Now, we know that this is coming back. You can see this here. This is coming back in Markdown. So instead of just dumping the Markdown in plain text like this, let's style that Markdown and make it look better. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to use marked to convert Markdown to HTML for AI messages, and we're going to keep the user messages as plain text. So we want to add styling for the common Markdown elements like code blocks, lists, bold, block quotes, etc. And we just want this to look good, but we want to preserve that existing think tag styling so that the think tag still is styled the way we just did this, right? So one thing we'll do here is we'll close this out. And we're going to do npm install marked. We're going to use the marked library for this. Okay, and then we'll start up npm run serve again. And then here, we're going to do import marked from marked so that we have that library here. Now, if we go in here to our messages, we can see here under load messages, this message equals result.data. Well, we need to change that a little bit, and we need to filter this through marked, and here's how we'll do it. Now here, if we have a user message, we can mark that in marked. And then we want to go to send messages and do the same thing. And what we're saying here is we want to run the message through marked if it's not part of that think section that we created earlier. Then we're going to need to add a whole bunch of styles. So once we run this thing through marked, it's going to take that and break it down into HTML. And every time we see some markdown in there, like we see a list or a code block or something like that, then it's going to render that out into HTML, which will need to be styled. And we'll do that here in our styles. And rather than make you watch me type it all out, I'm just going to paste it in. And here we can see that everything AI is obviously a result of the AI, right? It's the stuff that's coming back from the LLM. So we're going to look at the pre stuff, we're going to look at code, we're going to look at p tags, block quotes, etc. Now this should look a little bit better when it comes out. But we're going to have to add a process message method. We kind of see that up here. We're going to go over here to methods. We're going to add a method that's going to process this stuff. And again, I'm not going to make you watch me type it, but got it commented here, and so we're splitting the content by think tags. while preserving those tags. If it starts with think, then we're going to return that part of it unchanged. Otherwise, we're going to run it through marked. And so this is where the real magic happens, is in this process message. We're basically saying if it's located in think, we'll just leave it how it is. We'll pass it over. We'll style it so you can see it being different. And if it's not, then it's output from the LLM. It's in Markdown. We're going to run it through marked and kick it back as Markdown. So in here, where I just created this, we're actually going to change this instead to just be this process message. That way it's a little bit less work. So here we'll say this message, process message. Same thing with here. That way we can just process it through one time, we can change it in one place, and if we need to make some tweaks, we can just tweak the process message method instead. So what does this do? Well, it adds that new process message method that splits the message content by think tags, preserves the think blocks as they are, and applies Markdown processing to the output and joins everything back together. Now let's take a look at it and see what it looks like now. We can see here that the Markdown is now being rendered. But let's run another one. Now let's do something that's really going to push the Markdown here. We're going to say, write a short tutorial on how to connect to MySQL with Python. Will it send? We've got that send UI element going there, so we know that this is thinking, that it's doing something, and let's see what it looks like when it comes back. Okay, so now we got our result here, how to write a short tutorial on how to connect to MySQL with Python. We have this big, long thinking thing, so it did a lot of thinking about this before it prepared our article, and now we can see our article is in Markdown. So it looks a lot better, right? This is definitely better than just a huge clump of text and Markdown. That looks beautiful. There's one more thing that I want to do to this UI-wise before we move forward and we put in the final bit of functionality. And that is every time that I've been doing this, we have the session open and I cut it out of the video, but I've been doing this delete browsing data in order to delete that session to start over again. Let's build a button that does that for us. Because we might want to restart the session, right? So the first thing we need to do is add the button itself. So we can go up here in, let's see, the chat container. Let's just put this above the chat container. We're going to put in a new class, header, and this button, when you click it, is going to call a clear chat method. Okay, and then down here, right after our last method, we will drop in this async clear chat method. There we go. And what this method does is it says, are you sure you want to clear the chat history? Then it's going to send a delete. And it's going to send this to API/chat/clear. Right? And then that's going to clear our chat history just by removing that session ID. So each of these things is stored in a session, and as we go on, and you can close the browser and open it up back again, it doesn't matter. The only way I've been able to clear it is by deleting the cookies that are holding that session. So let's add some styles to this. And this is going to be our header, our clear button, etc. So now we have a header, we have our clear button, and then we will use this to clear. Now, we're calling a method that doesn't exist right now. So we need to go back in here into server.js, and we need to add this endpoint. So if we look here, we have app_post, app_get, etc. We'll just add it up here. App.delete, that's going to add that endpoint, API chat clear. It's going to accept a delete. When it does that, then it filters out the messages and deletes them and clears the message history. So this one's pretty simple. We're just going to delete all of the session IDs out of there. So we should be able to just clear the session when that's done. Now we reboot this thing, and we refresh, and we see we have a clear chat button up here at the top. So let's try this again. Tell me a funny joke about Python. Here's a lighthearted joke for you. Now, one thing that I don't like here is when there's no thinking involved, it just displays a black bar, but I think that's okay. We'll hit clear chat, and it says, hey, are you sure you want to clear the chat history? Yeah, I am. And it says failed to clear. So let's see why it failed to clear. 404 not found. It's probably because I did not restart this server. Let's go back here, restart server.js, and now it should work. There we go. So now we have a clear chat button. And this was something that I think is really important, because obviously you're going to want to clear this and start new sessions. Now we're here to the final functionality. So we want this to be a prompt builder, and I want to set it a specific set of instructions. That way people can put in the prompt that they want analyzed, and the LLM will analyze that prompt and make it better, right? That's the true functionality of this. This whole time we've been working on this chat functionality just to kind of keep it going as we go, but we want this to be a prompt builder. So let's make it a prompt builder. And we're going to go in here to app.view, and we're going to put in some instructions, right? Because we want people to know exactly what this functionality is all about. We can put this in the header. We can say, here's an H1 that says prompt builder. Enter in the prompt you would like optimized and follow the instructions until you have a final, better prompt. Okay, so now I've added some styling for this clear button. I've added some styling for the header. So this should look a little bit better. There we go. Now we have a clear chat, and we have this prompt builder. Enter in the prompt you would like optimized, follow the instructions until you have a final, better prompt. This tells people what they need to do with this. Now, I have this really long prompt, and I will open a temporary file here just to show you this prompt. This is a prompt that I've used extensively that says, act as an expert prompt engineer with extensive experience optimizing AI prompts for clarity, relevance, and output quality, blah, blah, blah. And you can see that it basically will take the prompt that you send it, and it will use sequential reasoning, contextual awareness, iterative refinement, etc., to fine-tune and create a better prompt from it. So this is what I want to send whenever somebody puts in their prompt. In here, I want to take this and prepend it with this prompt to tell ThinkSeek, hey, look at this prompt that's been put in, optimize it, maybe ask some questions, things like that, and give us a better prompt that we can use moving forward. So here's how I'm going to do that. We need to add a check to determine if it's the first user message in the session, right? Because we don't want to pre-prompt that with every single message, just the very first one. So in server.js, we'll go here where it says, create the final prompt with full conversation history. So this is where we've basically put all of this stuff together, and we're going to change it a little bit. And now we can see we have, if this is the first message. We create the prompt and say, if it's the first message, put in this huge thing, act as an expert engineer, and that's that big prompt that I just showed you. Then we're going to say user message, and then that will be the prompt that they enter. Otherwise, if it's not the first message, then we're just going to put in our conversation history, just like we did before. Okay, and then we just need to add this first message. And here we're going to create a constant and say, if this is the first message, length equals 1. So if we only have one message in the queue and it is this message, then we will prepend it with this giant prompt. Otherwise, we're just going to treat it as any other message. So let's save this. Let's restart our server and let's give it a shot. And here I'm going to say, I am going on a hike in the Rocky Mountains. What should I bring? So this is the prompt that the user is going to send that they want optimized. So we'll hit send. Okay, so it comes back and says, I'm going on a hike in the Rocky Mountains. What should I bring? We can see our thinking process here. The user wants to go on a hike and asking what they should bring. Let's break this down step by step, identify the task, etc. Then it comes back and it says, based on your query, here's an organized and refined version of the question with added clarity and specificity. This is the new prompt. So we've gone from this one little short prompt here, I'm going to hike in the Rocky Mountains, what should I bring, to, so then it says, I'm going on a hike in the Rocky Mountains, what should I bring? Please let me know if you need any additional items on specific information about the terrain to help make my planning easier. And it says this revised prompt is more clear, provides specific requirements, and can be effectively used by various AI models depending on their training data and context awareness. So now the application does what we wanted it to do, right? It takes a prompt and it optimizes it, kicks it back. And it's doing this all on our server. So we're not using any, just as a side note, we're not using any API tokens. We're not using anything that costs money that we have to worry about too many people using and running up our bill, etc. This is all located on this DeepSeek model that's self-hosted on this server. And again, if you want to set up something like this, go to hostinger.com/Jeremy, and you can set up this exact same server, just like we have, and you can build this application and build your own prompt optimizer or your own chat thing or whatever. Now for the final part, we want to set this up because we can see here it says not secure. It's also going to port 8080, which we don't exactly want. So let's set this up and run Nginx as a proxy to it and make this an actual real final application. Okay, so now I'm SSH'd into my server, right? And I'm in the chat backend folder, my prompt builder. And what I want to do is I want to set this up so that this server runs in the background, and I want it to come up after I reboot. So here's how we're going to do that. I'm going to use something called PM2. Sudo npm install -g PM2. Okay, and this will install our PM2. And I'll type in PM2 start server.js, and we'll create a name for it called chat backend. There we go. And we'll do PM2 startup. There we go. Now it's added it to the startup. So anytime the server reboots, it will still come back up. And then we'll type in PM2 save. Now this should be running, our chat backend should be running in the background. Now what we want to do is we want to run our Vue application, and I'm going to throw Nginx in front of it. And we're going to add in a certificate so that basically anytime the server is rebooted, it's going to start up the front end, it's going to start up the back end, everything's going to run, and we should be able to just go into my domain and see it with a valid certificate. Now, you can't really build a website these days without an SSL certificate. You just can't. Every browser out there is going to say this is insecure. We don't want stuff being passed in plain text, so we're going to set that up. Now, let's go to the front end app. We're going to go to chat front end. Whoops, and I accidentally hit cap. We'll go to chat front end. And I'm going to do an npm run build. This is going to build the latest version of that application. Awesome. And as we can see here, it says the disk directory is ready to be deployed. Now, we've been doing npm run serve, and we went back and forth with that. And that was all fine and dandy, except when we're doing a production app, we actually want it to be built into HTML files and then serve those HTML files off with Nginx. And we want these to be, minimized, etc. So basically, this is just going to be the production thing that everybody looks at when they go to our website. So let's make a prompt builder folder for this. I'm going to say -p var www prompt builder. And then I want to do change ownership of it to me. I'm going to say user. That's me and my group. Var www prompt builder. Okay, and then we will copy, we'll do cp-r dist. We're going to copy all of those files to var www prompt builder. Awesome. And you can set this up to go from a Git repository or something like that, and you can make this all automatic if you'd like. For now, we're just going to set this up. And we want to do a sudo apt update. Then sudo apt install Nginx. And we're just going to do a pretty standard common Nginx type install here. And we're going to say sudo ufw allow Nginx full, and update our firewall rules so that Nginx will run our firewall. Now, we need to go to etc Nginx sites available, and we have default. We're going to create a new one called promptbuilder.conf. And this is going to be a brand new file here. And for now, we're going to have it listen on port 80. And this is just temporary, but on port 80, we're going to say listen to promptbuilder.jeremymorgan.com. Now, I already have this domain pointed towards this IP address at this server on Hostinger. And then we're going to say root var www prompt builder. Remember, that's where we put it. Our index file is going to be index.html. And I forgot to type sudo. And I'm going to leave that in the video because I believe in showing people when you make mistakes, it's the best way to learn. So now I'm going to dump that same code in here. But now we're going to right quit. And we need to enable this configuration. Now, the way we do this is by adding it to sites enabled. or in this case, adding a symbolic link. Okay, and in here, we're adding our promptbuilder.conf, and we're putting a link into sites enabled. So this website should be enabled and come up. We're going to test this really quick and say sudo nginx-t. Configuration file, syntax is okay, and the test is successful. So we'll do sudo systemctl reload nginx. Awesome. Now we're going to go back to our browser here where we had it at point 8080. And now we're just going to load up promptbuilder.jeremymorgan.com. And as you can see, it comes up. It might even work. Tell me a funny joke about Python. And it's thinking. And we can actually go in here and take a look at the network to see network activity. And we can see it came back, and it's going to tell us a funny joke about Python. However, remember that this isn't an ordinary chat interface anymore. We're doing this prompt revision type thing. So as you can see here, here's your organized prompt. Think of a programmer as an idealist, etc. And it kind of goes on and on. But anyway, we just wanted to make sure that this works. But it's still not secure, right? And what did I say? We don't want to do insecure sites like this. We want SSL. So let's put that in. So in order to do that, I'm going to say sudo snap install core. We're going to install snap. That way we can use this as a package manager, and this will install the software that we need to get a SSL certificate. We're going to use Let's Encrypt for this. Now, Let's Encrypt provides free SSL certificates. This is an awesome organization. I recommend checking them out, donating to them when you can. They're pretty awesome. So we're going to say sudo snap refresh core. All right, no updates available. So now we're going to say sudo snap install classic certbot. Certbot is a application that you can use to generate and get SSL certificates from Let's Encrypt. And basically all it does is verifies that you own the domain, you are who you say you are. It'll kick back a certificate that will work on your domain. Awesome, and so it is installed. Now if we type in certbot, we should see it come up here. All right, so we do need to run this as root. So I'm going to say sudo certbot. Now it's going to say enter an email address for renewal and security notices. So I'm going to put in Jeremy@jeremymorgan.com. Please read the terms of service. Of course, I agree. Would you be willing, once your first certificate is successfully issued, to share your email address with the EFF? And I'm going to say no here because I've shared it with them a bunch of times and I don't want to flood their database. But if this is the first time you're doing it, you may want to do that. Now it's asking, which names would you like to activate HTTPS for? And we only have one available. There's only one server on here. So I'm going to put one. And it says requesting a certificate for promptbuilder.jeremymorgan.com. So now that's going in and verifying that we are who we say we are, that we're doing it. And here we go. Successfully deployed certificate onto jeremymorgan.com. Now we refresh the site and it's good to go. How easy is that? Now if we look at it, look at that. Connection is secure. So we have a valid certificate for promptbuilder.jeremymorgan.com. And this thing is secure. It's up. It's ready to go. Now here's the cool thing is the whole time that we were developing this, back earlier in the video, we were running these things down here in the terminal. We were running npm run serve. We were running npm server.js. We don't have to do any of that anymore. Our server.js is running in the background, just sitting and waiting. Our application is now being served up by Nginx. And so it's always up all the time. So even if the server reboots, this thing's still going to pop back up. Now, here's a few things to know before we wrap all of this up. This has been a very long video, and I want to thank you all for sticking with me through this whole thing. But before we wrap all this up, just like to say that this Hostinger server that I have is a big, giant server. So we don't necessarily need to just have this one application on it. I could have several applications on it. And one of the cool things about Nginx is I can go in and say, now I want to build something else that's called teacup.jeremymorgan.com, or I want to create something else that's like mycoolmustangsite.com. You can just add those in and put them in. For future reference, if you're going to build something like this, there's a few things that you may want to add. And part of that is Git integration. So you have some kind of continuous integration in there where you can say, I want to pull this from a Git repository and build it automatically. Every time I change that Git repository, I want it to kick off a build, push it into that bar www directory, etc. That'd be a cool future thing to do on here. Running things in containers would be another cool thing that you could do. You could put this application into a container and run it there. I will have a container image of this available on docker.com if you just want to pull it down and run it from there. So there's a lot of things you can do to make this a more professional application. But what I wanted to do is show you how you can start with absolutely nothing, purchase a server on Hostinger.com, put it all together, build it, deploy it, you're ready to go. So right here, we have a legitimate app. And what is cool about this app is you're in control. You know, you're owning your own AI here in that you're not sending this off to an API, to some other service somewhere or anything like that. It's all running self-contained in your server here. So at Hostinger.com, there's all kinds of cool stuff to check out here. But if you go here, choose your plan. Right now, we're running this KVM 8, and this is what we started out with. So if you choose this plan, $19.99 a month, you can get started. You can build this exact same thing. You can have your own AI application here for $19.99 a month. All right, so go to hostinger.com/Jeremy and check it out. Choose a plan. So with this one, we have 32 gigs of RAM. We have 400 gigabytes of space. You could probably run this same thing on the KVM4, which is a little bit cheaper, but you're going to have half as many CPU cores and half as much RAM. You're probably going to want to stick with a smaller 1.5 billion parameter model for that. This is really cool. Some other things to add here with Hostinger is there are templates. So you can set up templates for Ollama, NPM, all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to manually configure stuff if you don't want to. Thanks for sticking with me through this. In this tutorial, we walk through creating a complete AI-powered prompt optimization application from the ground up. Here's everything we accomplished. We started by setting up a Hostinger VPS server and creating a secure user environment. Then we built a full stack application using Vue.js for the front end and Node.js with Express for the back end. We implemented Ollama to run the DeepSeek AI model locally, allowing us to process these AI requests without depending on external services or APIs. The application features included real-time chat functionality, Markdown rendering, loading states, and session management. We added some styling to differentiate between AI responses and thinking processes. For security, we implemented SSL using Let's Encrypt and set up proper server configuration with Nginx. So it was start to finish. The final result is a professional-grade web application that helps users optimize their AI prompts running entirely on your own server for maximum control and privacy. Now, if you enjoyed this tutorial and you want to learn more about building real-world applications with AI, web development, and server management, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can also check out hostinger.com/Jeremy to get started with your own VPS server. Thanks for watching and happy building.